I don't think everyone should be telling horrific stories because
Mm.
not everyone is gifted in a way that they can do that without it destroying them.
Yeah. Right.
And I don't think everyone should consume those stories because not everyone is constructed in a way that they can consume those stories without it destroying them or damaging them or hurting them.
What's up, Story Geeks? It's Jay Sherer. Should you approach horror differently, and how? Please bash that like button for me. And if you have any questions for Caleb or I as this conversation progresses, just leave them down in the comments and we'll reply. Links to all of the things that we talk about in terms of tools or resources will always be in the description down below. But let's dig deeper into horror stories.
So for the people who have told you that there's not a place for horror, or they question the place for horror, what do you think is causing them to ask that question?
I think there is a legitimate human thing, a couple legitimate human things going on beneath there. So I never judge anyone for feeling that way or experiencing that because frankly, I don't think everyone should be telling horrific stories because not everyone is gifted in a way that they can do that without it destroying them.
Right.
And I don't think everyone should consume those stories because not everyone is constructed in a way that they can consume those stories without it destroying them or damaging them or hurting them. So I think part of it is just that some of us can be, some of us have to see different levels of fear and different levels of horror to have the effect on us, the positive effects on us that I'm talking about. And for people who don't need a lot, who respond to very small amounts of danger or tension or whatever, that's kind of a gift, you know, and I would never want them to not have that experience. You know, I don't want to drag them into something that's just so dark that it hurts them. But other people have had very dark lives and they need to see something even darker than that. You know, they need to know that there are still worse things and those things can still be delivery systems for grace. And so I think that's probably the main place that it comes from. And I think there's another human, and I think there's something noble in this because I believe in the idea of vocation, which is just a Latin word for calling, that we all have different callings in life. And not all of us are called to all four of the corners of that square. And to people who are, especially to people who are called to the how the world can be better corner of the square, it's very hard for them to understand people who are always talking about how the world can get worse or what's wrong.
Right.
And because they genuinely want the world to be better and they don't understand how to do that except focusing on how do we make the world better? How do we think about that? How do we make that who we are? So much a part of who we are that's always what we're doing in some small way. And I think that's incredibly important. I think those are kind of the places that it comes from when people don't understand. And so I never insist people should understand horror. And I never insist that people should understand my horror. I do think that there are some genres it's okay to show to anyone. And there are some genres you have to be really careful. They can hurt. They can be triggering. They can create fears in someone who never had a fear before, that type of fear. And so it's a sharper blade. Some other things. And so, but I love it when people that I love and who I respect as artists challenge me on it. It really forces me to think through. I can't just blindly say, I like things that are scary. Because when someone who I really respect and who's very thoughtful and who I also respect as an artist is challenging me and making me articulate why I think that's where energy should go. Like if I have the energy to tell a story, why should this one be a horror story? I think those are important conversations. I think everyone should have that person who is creative and thoughtful, but does not reach the same conclusions as you and is constantly challenging you because in answering them, you have to clarify for yourself what you do truly believe and vice versa.
I love that. I tend to avoid horror just because of how it causes me to have anxiety. That I have like, nightmares for a week. However, I don't dislike the thought that horror is a valuable genre, because I actually feel remorseful frequently that we don't see the same energy poured into tragedy, because I think we see a lot of it's funny, we tend to live in a world where, at least in the United States of America, for people like you and me, I mean, times have never been better in a lot of respects, right? We have a lot of things available to us. Life is, I don't want to say life is easy, because people have very, very difficult lives. But what I'm saying is, like, there's not the hardships that were faced 200 years ago, right? We're trying to build America. And I think about that. I think it's interesting to me that people that are in the science fiction, fantasy, comic book place, a lot of them, and this is generally true of the general population as well, but they like to go see like the MCU movies, and the MCU movies make you feel happy at the end of them, as if we do live in a world where we're required to escape it, right? One
of them did not end that way.
That's true. And that was one of my favorites, actually. That's one of my favorite movies because of that. But I think that tragedy has a very deep spiritual place in our storytelling, and I think horror similarly fits into this category, where a lot of stories, especially stories that come out of the US, are about how we can rise up out of our circumstances, how we can make better choices so that the world is a better place. There's nothing wrong with that. That's absolutely 100% true. But I think for some people, the question needs to be asked, and at least asked. I'm not saying you need to come to the same conclusion I come to, but it needs to be asked, is what happens when you can't make it any better, or it never will get better? In other words, where do you find hope when you look, all you do is look around and find despair? I think horror, like you're saying, horror can do that to you. It can say, well, I better have a perspective wherein I see something to place hope in. For me, it's always been, the question I've always had is like, going to the comic book realm, is like, yeah, Superman could save the planet. Like, he might save Metropolis, but he's not helping you if you die. Like, if you die, Superman is inconsequential to whatever happens next, right? And I feel like tragedies, and I feel like horror films or stories or whatever, I feel like that genre can take you to a place where it is helpful for you to reflect on deeper spiritual, deeper humanistic, deeper unmaterialistic thought processes that can bring about development in your life. So even though I don't watch a lot of horror, I respect when it takes on that level of intricacy in the way that it deals with things.
Yeah, no, I think you're dead on. I actually, one of the things I talk about sometimes is that, especially in the Western world, we have a very anemic language for grief. I mean, like, we have a very anemic grammar of grief, or language of lament. I like both of them because they're alliterative. Yeah. But we don't, for most of human history, if a family member died, they died in the house and you were there. Yep. We don't see dead bodies anymore. We're not there when people die anymore. We and even just on a micro level, like Instagram and Facebook, we post the positive pictures on a good day, and we don't post the day when we never got out of our underwear and just ate Doritos in chocolate pudding all day long and cried. And so even that is becoming no one, like, we're just not acknowledging that we have grief and that we lament and that we have hard times. And so I think, particularly in the Western world, we're losing it. There used to be very rich ways to talk about these things. And we're losing a lot of that language because a lot of that language requires experience. And so I think one of the most important functions of artists in the Western world in particular in the 21st century will be to create new grammars of grief and languages of laments, and
Mm.
to preserve those as part of our culture.
Yeah.
To preserve how to lament when something awful has happened that no one can do anything about. How to grieve when someone dies. So that's just me getting like on my soapbox about the place of artists in the 21st century.
That's it for today's video. Special thanks again to Caleb Monroe for joining me. If you have any comments or any questions, leave them in the comments down below. Make sure you subscribe. We've got more great content about how to write and produce your very own science fiction and fantasy stories. You don't want to miss any of that. If you want to listen to the full unedited interview between myself and Caleb, go support us over on Patreon, patreon.com. You can support us for as little as $2 a month. It's a huge help to us and we really appreciate it. I'll see you on the next video.